This high line was utter madness from Postecoglou. And yet, it might have been secretly genius. And Spurs' red cards should have come a lot earlier. So allow me to explain this tactic and something that you missed. Right, welcome back to the first 45. We're going to jump into the Spurs versus Chelsea game and try to explain that incredible high line used by Postecoglou as his team went down to 9 men. But stick around past that, because we've also got the post show where we're going to be talking about the Arsenal-Newcastle game and whether or not that goal should have stood. We're going to touch on Manchester City and how they're slyly going under the radar at how good they've been this season. We're also going to look at the Liverpool-Luton 1-1 draw, maybe talk a little bit about that Luis Diaz situation, and if we feel like it, we'll touch on the Nottingham Forest incredible win at home versus Aston Villa. But let's jump straight into it. This Spurs-Chelsea game had a lot riding on it heading into the game. Obviously, we know that this rivalry is a fierce one. We've had some incredible games over the years, probably the most memorable one being the Battle of the Bridge. But I'll take you back to last season. It doesn't feel like last season based on the characters that were involved. But we had Tuchel at the head of Chelsea, Conte at the head of Tottenham, and that famous clash with the handshake. We've had some incredible games, a lot of rivalry, but not just the rivalry itself, what it meant for this season. Obviously, we had Manchester City getting a brilliant 6-1 win over Bournemouth, but Arsenal and Liverpool dropping points over the weekend. It was an opportunity for not only Tottenham to make a statement and say that they can beat a rival like Chelsea, a team that they've struggled with over the last few years, but also make a statement to the league that they're going to continue their unbeaten run and really show the league that they are a force to be reckoned with. And that was sort of the air that was going into this Spurs versus Chelsea game heading into North London. And it started quick, it started fiery, and we could break down, all of this whole game. We had just quickly, Chelsea, starting with this mid-narrow block, trying to screen any passes into Basuma. It meant that Tottenham could progress the ball in wide areas really easily. It meant that Tottenham really had a really fast start to the game, putting 2 past Chelsea in the opening 15 minutes, 1 getting disallowed for offside, I believe. Then the momentum swings in Chelsea's favour. Chelsea win a penalty after a horror challenge from Romero, who was lucky to be on the pitch anyway after he kicked out Colwill. So many decisions. It was 35 minutes of football that was absolute carnage, was absolute chaos. And we can speak about the VAR, the referees, but that's not what we're here for today. Maybe we can touch on that if I feel like it in a little bit. I'm going to jump straight into that second half. We all know what happened. Spurs are down to 9 men. 9 men on the pitch. Udogie, Romero are off. Van der Ven, James Maddison, they're not on the pitch due to their injuries. Everything was going wrong for Tottenham, and yet Postecoglou showed his massive bollocks right to the TV screen and showed basically that his team will never relent or revert back to anything other than front foot forward football. And coming away from this game, we had the pundits on the TV, sort of in awe, bewilderment and admiration for Postecoglou's, reaction to going down to 9 men and how he stuck with that high line and refused to budge. And naturally, that meant that social media and fans pushed back on this. And waking up this morning and reading sort of the reaction from the game, the sort of, the opinions coming out from Monday night, I sort of think that, the general consensus now from fans is that Postecoglou was, stupid, idiotic, perhaps even naive to continue with that high line. And that obviously that led to, Chelsea, running away with the game in the end. And in fact, maybe Ange is just this, hipster footballing tactician that isn't really fit, to win games, or to win those vital points when things just do go wrong for you in a game like the Chelsea Spurs game. But I want to explain this high line and maybe offer a different opinion, a different look at it, because I think, there are some people that are missing what this high line does for Spurs. And, I think it's an interesting thing because, like we say, we have not seen this. It's very rare that we ever see a team go down to 9 men. So that in itself is rare. So it's even more rare when we see, well, what does a team do? The general consensus from fans is that when you go down to 9 men, it's time to shut up shop the best you can, settle into a low defensive block on the edge of your own area, and sort of just accept today hasn't been your day. That the game's gone, settle into your defensive shape now, and just pray that you can get a point out of this game and move on. Now, let's break down why that in itself might be wrong. First of all, I think we need to prove the alternative wrong before we can prove Postecoglou's answer correct, if that makes sense. First of all, we need to understand, as an 11 versus an 11 game, with the detail in the attacking structure and shapes that these teams are being coached in, we are seeing overloads in all areas of the pitch to try and gain advantages, to try and gain numbers, to exploit spaces. And this is in an 11 versus an 11 game. So when you go down to 8 outfield players versus 10 outfield players, the gap in the ability to create space and to create overloads becomes so stretched that, in my opinion, it becomes nigh on impossible to defend in a low block and to be successful in doing so. The amount of space and opportunity for Chelsea to continually probe at Spurs and their penalty area, I think would have proved to be too much, regardless of how well Spurs defended, because they simply don't have enough men on the pitch to cover the ground, to shift from left and right. And Chelsea, would have broken down Spurs fairly easily eventually. Now, would the score have been 4-1? Perhaps not. I'll concede that. But I think the result wouldn't have been any differently. So in terms of your defending shape, other than the perceived look from team to fans that, we are showing the world that we are, shutting up shop, curling up and hoping, it's almost a message to its fans that this is what we're doing. We understand that things have gone wrong and we are now sort of defending this point for you, and we're going to sit on the edge of our box and defend like warriors for this point. Other than the perceived, showing the world that we're going to do that, the advantages in your defensive shape, for me, are pretty non-existent. So if your defensive shape is non-existent, then we need to look, okay, well, what are you offering going forward? Well, sitting on the edge of your penalty box means that, well, it sounds pretty obvious, but there is a lot of distance to cover when you do receive the ball. Now, naturally, when you're defending with 9 men on the pitch, you are going to sort of the absence of players is going to come in the form of your attacking players, because you're on the back foot, you need those defensive numbers. So naturally, you're not going to commit that amount of numbers to your attacking, style or approach. So not only are you not only are you completely outnumbered in your attacking approach, you're committing 2, maximum 3 to your counter attacks. You've also got to counter attack through such a large distance to even reach the Chelsea penalty area. You are completely outnumbered with so much grass in front of you to cover that you simply cannot transition through when you've basically got a 6v3 to try and get past. It's relying on long balls. It's relying on individual mistakes from Chelsea. Their attacking threat for me also becomes non-existent. Got so much space to cover with a lack of numbers that it becomes incredibly difficult to score. So we have this low block sat on the edge of the penalty area, which their defensive shape is a complete disadvantage to them due to their lack of numbers, and their attacking formation, their attacking build-up is at a complete disadvantage, again due to their lack of numbers, but also due to the distance from picking up the ball to reaching the Chelsea penalty area. And on top of both of those things, we also just think of sort of the momentum of the game. Sitting at your penalty area means that the momentum of the game is always going to be in Chelsea's favour. The swing of play is always going to be to the attacking team when the defending team has 9. This means that there's going to be a constant probe right at the edge of the Spurs penalty area, which is incredibly dangerous. So I'm looking at this situation that if they did sit in their mid-block, I don't see many advantages, and I certainly see a lot of disadvantages. Now, that can be accepted because going down to 9 men, you should be at a disadvantage. That's the whole point. You should be at a significant disadvantage, and you are trying your absolute best at any given opportunity to try and make up for those disadvantages. So let's now, once we've understood that, let's now look at Postecoglou's approach, and perhaps what does that offer us that the low block doesn't? Well, first of all, what did Postecoglou do? He sat basically 6 players on the halfway line as their last line of defence, and basically hoped that Chelsea would continue to be offside for the rest of the game, right? It's a dangerous and scary approach to playing a game of football, but when we break it down, you might see that there's actually a lot of advantages. Now, first of all, quickly on the high line approach, I didn't know where I was ever going to get this point in because I've been thinking about it for a while, but I think that Klopp doesn't get the plaudits for the high line approach in the most recent years as much as I think he should do. Now, don't get me wrong, he didn't invent the high line, far from it, but you will notice that since the introduction of VAR and what it is supposed to be, Klopp has had an increasingly high line, scarily high line at points. And I think, I can only speculate, but what I can believe is what VAR is supposed to represent is a black and white decision on most decisions, but certainly offside. It's supposed to represent that if a player makes a run in an offside position, that will 100% of the time get called for offside. Now, as it's played out, that hasn't always been the case, and it's been the topic of discussion. But what it has led, and, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Klopp has been the most prominent use of this, is that it basically gives him the confidence to play a high line because it puts all of the responsibility on that back line, meaning that if a player isn't offside, it is solely the defensive line's fault, and they didn't push up at the right times. They didn't, perform that trap quick enough or sharp enough to make that player offside. But if that player is offside, it doesn't leave it down to chance. It means that if it is offside, it will get ruled off. It means that teams can push that high line further and further up because they're basically just relying on, what VAR is supposed to be, a black and white technology that will tell you whether or not a man is offside or not. So that basically that is an advantage there for Spurs. Something that they would not have been able to do, 5 years ago. I think plenty of those runs from Sterling, from Jackson, even from Cucurella, who was the only player on the pitch that realised that runs from deep would harm Spurs. I think a lot of those runs would have been missed by just the linesman. And actually VAR then becomes an advantage to a team because of how black and white it is supposed to be. So they're sat on the halfway line. Now, how does this affect Chelsea, first of all? Well, Spurs sat so high up, not only, means that Chelsea have to, their last line of attack is at the halfway line rather than at the penalty area or even further, into the 6-yard box. It means that Chelsea's first line of attack is much further away from goal. Again, we're talking distances here. Their first line of attack is much further away from goal than what it would have been otherwise. But what it also does do is it compresses the pitch right into this middle third, not even a middle third, this small strip just in front of the halfway line. In Chelsea's half, and naturally, when the ball is so congested, the play is so congested. Naturally, you have Spurs who are relentless in staying there, but you also have Chelsea's backline that are slowly sort of just edging forward themselves as they're looking to play balls over the top or as they're looking to regain their possession. So naturally, you could basically throw a blanket over all of the players, which is important to remember later on. So as Chelsea are continuing to play those balls, over the top, trying to get runners in behind, Ange's team, relying on VAR to do its job, you think, well, all of that negative space must be a disadvantage. And it is, in a sense, that you don't have that recovery pace to get back. Once they are in behind, they are in behind, and it's a 1v1 versus the goalkeeper, perhaps a 1v2 or 3. The negatives can happen are huge, but that dead space is carefully managed. You then make the goalkeeper essentially an extra defender. When you have the low block, the goalkeeper is essentially just on his line, maybe trying to come out for any crosses, but really he becomes a shot-stopping goalkeeper and you rely on his shot-stopping ability. When you have such a high line, the goalkeeper becomes almost the last man in defence and can sweep up any overhit balls by Chelsea. We've seen this from the likes of Edison and Alisson, who will come, so far out of their own box that they're clearing up anything that is overhit. So then, actually, when you sort of draw the lines, if you want to be a nerd, you then actually create this really small strip just behind the Tottenham back line where balls can be placed into and the goalkeeper cannot reach. So when you think about Chelsea's attacking threat, they are now much further away from the Tottenham goal than what they would be, and the opportunity to place balls in behind actually is condensed to a sort of 15-yard area where the goalkeeper doesn't have enough time to come off of his line, and obviously the defenders don't have enough time to track back. So Chelsea in themselves are fairly limited. There are disadvantages, but like we've said, having 9 men includes disadvantages. There is no way to swing the game in your favour when you have 9 men. But it's about creating your advantages. And Chelsea's disadvantages is a part of Tottenham's advantages. Chelsea's ability to attack has been reduced by the distance between them and goal and the amount of area they have to play a ball in behind. First of all, let's go into, their defensive, shape. If they did drop into that low block, we are now seeing a team that not only any team in world football would struggle to defend in a low block with 8 outfield players, that based on everything that we explained earlier on. Now, Tottenham being asked to do that is a whole nother level, because Tottenham have not been coached for the last 4 to 5 months to defend in that way. Now, that may sound silly and stupid, because every team should be able to be versatile enough to defend in every block, to defend in every aspect, to manage every aspect of a game. But you're putting a lot of stress on a team to defend in a way that they are completely unfamiliar with, both coach and team, on top of all of the number disadvantages that they have during that moment. So, it maybe is a slightly simple point, but defending a high line does not, having a high line should not be sacrificed in the absence of players, because your high line is a back line of 4, 5, or 6. And we've already said that the absence of players when teams go down to 9 men is not in the defense, but rather in the attack. So their high line is structured the same as it would be if there was 11 men on the pitch. Does that make sense? Because their back line isn't short of numbers. They've committed numbers to their back line to make sure their back line works. And now they are defending in a shape, in a system that they are used to, that they are confident in, and that they have been trained in over months and months and months. Their defensive shape there is no disadvantage really, other than just what a high line has in its disadvantages, just in its essence. A high line, whether or not you have 11 men on the pitch, or 9 men on the pitch, or 6 men on the pitch, has the same disadvantages. Actually, their defending shape really allowed them to defend exactly how they would have wanted to. Now, they defended very high, very, very high. And like we've said, that's to squeeze the pitch. Now, why are they trying to squeeze the pitch into this narrow strip in the centre of the park? Well, that comes to their attacking advantages. Now, naturally, when Tottenham receive the ball, like we said, in their low block, they've got a lot of distance to cover with a lot less numbers, which becomes incredibly difficult. Now Tottenham are a lot closer to Chelsea's goal. Again, we're just talking distances here. It sounds simple, but sometimes just getting closer to the goal is an advantage in itself. Tottenham are closer to Chelsea's goal, so when they receive the ball, they haven't got to transition through their own half and try and counter-attack with, 2v6s. They're in Chelsea's half. They can now commit numbers. The gap between their defensive structure and their attacking structure is like that, whereas the gap between their defensive and attacking structure in a low block is all of this. So naturally, you're going to create spaces when you're shifting from defense to attack. There's going to be a lot of spaces in that transition because of the amount of distance you're having to cover. Pushing everything up this way means that transitioning from attack to defense means a lot less space, means that they can flow through those two structures very easily. But what it also does is, because Chelsea are slowly edging their back line forwards, once Tottenham do regain possession much higher up the pitch than what they would have done, it means, in fact, they themselves have a high line to exploit in Chelsea's high line. If you see that screenshot, maybe watch certain aspects of the game back, you'll see not only how condensed that pitch is, but you'll see Chelsea's line coming up, and you'll see that, at times Son, maybe Kulusevski, even maybe a fullback are getting in behind Chelsea's back line. But this is the advantage that the halfway line, this high line, actually offers you. You do not have to transition from defense and attack over big distances, means the transitions become more fluid. And once you do gain the ball, you're so much closer to Chelsea's goal, and you can exploit their high line. And it led to Chelsea actually, well, they did score. It was offside in the end, but it led to, Tottenham scoring, and it led to them getting opportunities, and they could have equalized. So if we take a step back and we understand both aspects of the game, and we understand, well, what are the advantages, what are the disadvantages, all logic has gone out of the window. This game has committed to chaos, and everything that both teams have planned in preparation to this game have gone. So now we just need to commit to chaos and play the percentages. And that's what Ange did. You were sacrificing the idea that they could get in behind our back line, which is something that his team has accepted throughout this season, because their high line has been a prominent feature of their team throughout this season. You accept that and you give your team the best possible advantage to win that game. And that is what Ange has promised, Tottenham fans and the league that he is going to do. He is going to try his best to win the games. And yes, it led to a 4-1 battering, and it led to maybe a slightly embarrassing scoreline, and Tottenham's unbeaten streak goes up in flames. But if we were to watch, both both potentials play out side by side, I think we'd realize that actually you were far more likely to win the game that way than what you were in a low block. I think hopefully I've explained there some advantages and disadvantages as well, so that you can disagree with me 100%, because that is what football is about. Not every team sets up in the same way for many different reasons, and one of them being because coaches believe in their way of football, and that can be applied to fans. Fans believe in a way that football should be played. So if you think that low block would have given you more advantages, that's fine. But hopefully you now don't just see it as this senseless, Australian coming in thinking that he can just do whatever the fuck he wants and will just never adjust and adapt to a game state or to anything happening in a game, and will just blindly walk into 4-1 batterings at home. And actually, I think there's a lot of thought behind it. And that's why I call it brave. I don't like Tottenham. I actually don't have anything bad to say against the club themselves. It's just, bad things happened with Liverpool versus Tottenham. That's given me PTSD. Hence, I don't like the club. Very no explanation, very unfair, but, has led to me not liking Tottenham. What can you do about it, right? I don't want to defend Tottenham. Like I said at the beginning, I was wearing the blue of Chelsea coming into this game. I wanted Chelsea to win, and I'm very happy that they did win. But I'm calling it brave because it is. It's a front-footed approach with sense and detail and actually a lot of advantages. So hopefully, we've understood that a little bit more. Hopefully you've enjoyed that little bit. You've understood a little bit more. Please tell me what I've missed and maybe some things that I've missed that's positive for the High Line or that's extremely detrimental, other than, they can get in behind. We get it, right? They can get in behind, but that's what, Postecoglou wants to happen in football games, apparently. Anyway, so let's jump into the post show. Now, if you're new to the podcast, it's only 3 episodes, so you're not missed much, but usually we do the pre-show where we talk about just briefly some of the games that have happened over the weekend, and then we hop into the main show, hence the first 45, if that makes sense. And we tactically break down, the biggest game of the weekend. But we flipped it around because of just how passionate and how much I wanted to sort of talk about that High Line. So we're going to jump into the post show this time round. We're going to talk about quickly that Arsenal-Newcastle game. A very interesting game. Now, I'm going to be totally transparent to you. I'm not one of those people that pretends like they watch every 90 minutes of football. I actually haven't managed to catch all of the second half of this game, which, where the goal happened. I have seen everything, don't get me wrong. Like, I know what's happened, but I'm not going to tell you that, I understand the game fully in its context. But what I can sort of offer is a couple of things that I pointed out in that first half, because I watched it closely. A very interesting game, a very intense game, another physical game. It does feel like tempers are flaring a little bit in the Premier League, and there is maybe a sense of almost desperation that I think it's maybe due to City's dominance. Maybe. I think a lot of teams, naturally in a Premier League, the balance shifts and swings to different teams. And I think that then has negative effects on the rest of the league because teams fall down. I think we're almost gaining a point of you have the teams like Arsenal and Liverpool who are continuing to try and break the glass ceiling that is Manchester City, and the idea that they simply cannot fall off from those heights. So they are attempting everything to stay at the most pristine and elite level of football, and then all of these other teams, the likes of Newcastle, Villa, Brighton, Chelsea, Man United, they're all trying to follow, and it's creating this bunch of sort of second to seventh of all of these teams that are becoming really interchangeable on their day. And my whole point of that is I think that's playing out on the pitch and is leading to very physical and aggressive games, which I like. I like those sort of games, even though it leads to 27 minutes of VAR. But what I did notice was, first of all, obviously, Tonali no longer playing for the club for 10 months. Joel Linton comes in as that left-sided midfielder, and I think he plays that position a lot differently to Tonali. Tonali is, I think he's definitely been misprofiled by a lot of people, but what he definitely is a silky midfielder, a technically good midfielder, and a tactically intelligent midfielder, but not the runner, not the powerhouse, not the strength that Joel Linton offers. And he plays that position with far more aggression, which obviously can lead to the undoing of Newcastle at times, not specifically that position, but, overdoing that press, overdoing that aggression can lead, to losing out on points or losing control of games. But I really enjoyed how he plays that position. And I think actually he right now for Newcastle in those sort of games definitely is a much better fit in that left-sided midfield position. As for Arsenal, I thought they defended brilliantly, apart from one thing that we'll speak about. Really fluid back line. I think we're seeing, the back line of teams becoming a really vital part of any team, that they are so fluid in not only how they sort of shift in their build up from left to right, and how certain players will drag high and wide, but also I think they defend distances really, really well. Newcastle love to create in wide areas and almost have those third man runners on the wings. And I think, the relationship between the fullback and the centre back at Arsenal is probably at an all-time high at the minute. They defend those wide areas so well. You had the wingers tracking back and really halted Newcastle, creating a lot from what they like to do. But speaking of the defending, let's go into that goal. I don't want to get into the nitty gritty of it because it's a bit boring. Everyone will have their opinion, especially if you have an association with one of the clubs. But one thing I do want to say, and I think not many people have said it, obviously I've seen on Twitter and everything the commotion that happened due to this goal. Was the ball out? No, it's pretty self-explanatory. But the big thing was, Joel Linton has pushed Gabriel. I then watched the clip and was baffled that anyone thinks that Gabriel was fouled. If you screenshot it, yes, Joel Linton has his arms straight out on Gabriel. If you just watch the replay of that, of Gabriel's defending, he completely relinquishes all responsibility. He goes to lunge, flick on the ball, feels someone on his back, and lunges forward. What Gabriel has done there has tried to draw a foul and relinquishes the responsibility of defending your line. And that is what's caused the goal. Like, the defender's first thought should be, get the ball out. You can draw fouls in certain areas of the pitch at certain times of the game, but when you are flicking a ball off your own line to save a goal, you do not take the easy way out and try and draw a foul. And that's, I think, exactly what he's tried to do. I don't know the specific written rules that are to say that, just simply having the two hands on the back means that it is a foul. But what I can say is Gabriel probably deserved to concede that goal based on the lack of responsibility he took in defending his goal. The first thing he should have thought is to head that ball out and not try and, draw a foul. And also, I've completely forgotten about this, excuse me. You know, we can complain all we want about decisions and all of those things, but let's also take responsibility for what your team isn't doing correctly. And when Joe Willock collects that ball that's just in on the touchline, no one closes him down. I think I have here White, Saka, and Jorginho all refuse to close down Joe Willock, and he has all the time in the world to pick out his cross. And obviously that doesn't, that shouldn't excuse poor refereeing, if that's what you want to call it. But you also need to, put some responsibility on your players. And the complete lack of ambition to press Joe Willock was a little bit embarrassing. So I think Arsenal are really good and fun to watch and really well coached. And you'll see that the more I talk about Arsenal, the more you'll see the respect I have for this team. But you have to call it out. I think that sort of 30 seconds of play was a little bit embarrassing from Arsenal defensively. But let's move on to what a lot of people are saying, they're contenders for the league. Manchester City. Obviously, the headlines coming out of this game was Doku, 4 assists, a goal, an excellent performance from the Belgian. Lots of people citing that, Klopp, sort of scouted this guy or mentioned this guy when he was like 17. Such an amazing talent. His dribbling ability is scary at times. It's scary times for Jack Grealish, but I didn't want to concentrate too much on Doku. I think we all know that. It's very, it's been talked about a lot. We all understand that. I think what sort of has gone under the radar, almost, frighteningly, is how good Manchester City are. They've gone top of the table now. I think 1 or 2 points at the top of the table. And they have the best defense in the league, the best attack in the league. They've just beaten Manchester United 3-0. They've just beaten Bournemouth 6-1. Manchester City are beginning to fly again with the reintroduction of Rodri. This Manchester City team are looking really scary, and they have a really tough run of fixtures now. Chelsea, Liverpool, Tottenham, and Villa all in the next 4 games. So it will be a really crucial time of the season. But from what they've showed over the last couple of weeks, just quietly, reaching the pinnacle of the Premier League and not looking to give it up anytime soon. This is going to be a really pivotal time for Manchester City. And I think, 12 points up for grabs versus Chelsea, versus Liverpool, Tottenham, and Villa. I think if they come away from those games with 9 or more points, it's going to take a bit of a miracle to knock them off their perch this season. A really crucial time for Manchester City, and maybe just turn your attentions to them, just sort of see how they're performing, just to scare yourself, really. Obviously, we touched on Liverpool there, my team, getting that draw away at Luton. Before the game, I felt something was going to happen this game. It was written for that, under the lights, 4:30 against a newly promoted team away, such a hostile atmosphere. It felt like Liverpool were going to drop points. It feels very Liverpool that they did. But coming away from at the end of the game, getting the draw, haven't got to go there for another year. Happy with that. So I guess a point is okay, not to be too negative. Certainly all of this, title contender and Liverpool are back. I don't think any of that is out the window. I think that can still be discussed and talked about. We don't need to throw a tantrum. But the main positive for me was Luis Diaz getting that goal, revealing his shirt, everything that he's going through right now. Awful situation. Obviously, we just hope that everything can be resolved. Everyone gets home safely. He has his family back. He has his dad back. But obviously, football for all of us is an escape, a thing that we can all enjoy. So hopefully, those minutes away at Luton, getting that goal just allowed for him, just for even the briefest of seconds, to, turn off from all of that sadness and anger that he must be feeling right now, and he was able to, do the thing that he loves and score goals, for Liverpool. So, right, let's finish off. Let's go to Nottingham Forest and Aston Villa. I actually watched this game, folks. Who would have thought it? No, but Nottingham Forest picking up an excellent win versus Aston Villa. Aston Villa have been looking seriously good this season. Unai Emery getting them playing brilliant football. And I think with a win versus Nottingham Forest, they could have crept up to the top 2 or 3 maybe in the table at obviously the time. So it would have been a huge win for Aston Villa if they could have pulled it off. But Nottingham Forest did what they've been doing this season of taking down another giant, obviously beating Chelsea away at Stamford Bridge, now beating Aston Villa. A really good performance from Steve Cooper's men. Martinez coming off the back of winning the best goalkeeper and putting a bit of a horror show with that second goal. I did want to say, I've completely forgotten how to pronounce his name. Anya, the right back, I think looked really good. I really like how he plays football. I've seen him in a couple of games this season and really enjoyed sort of his game. I don't know too much about him. I won't be able to give you too many details, but from what I've seen, I think maybe just keep an eye on him, see how he progresses throughout the season, and released a beautiful shot to put Nottingham Forest 1-0 up. Obviously, their attack for me, as someone that doesn't watch Nottingham Forest week in, week out, but from what I do see of them, their attack looks so dangerous. I think we forget last season how poor Forest were for a lot of the season. They were looking, relegation certainty for good points in the season, and Steve Cooper did a brilliant job keeping them up in the Premier League for another season. And they're doing really well this season. They're picking up points where they shouldn't be. They're performing at a high level, and I think a lot of that obviously comes down to Steve Cooper's, coaching and everything that's going on with the staff there. But also I think that their attack is going to win them games. Gibbs, White, Elanga, Awonyi. That's a really scary front line, and is going to get them a lot of goals. Right. I am burping. I've just realised this might be a shorter one this time round, which I'm a bit bummed about. I always want to reach maybe like the hour mark or whatnot, but I think it's because we broke down just specifically that high line from Tottenham versus Chelsea. Let me know if there's anything specific you want me to talk about in the next podcast. Hopefully you get to the end of it. I guess I can actually speak about just a little 1v1 chat to anyone that has reached the end, because if you have reached the end, then you probably half care about what I have to say. The podcast isn't doing as well as obviously some of my other videos. I sort of knew that going in, because it isn't, I make my other videos sort of tailored sort of to the algorithm, or a lot faster pace. Naturally, people are going to watch longer of them, and it's a little bit more just tailored to a quicker, more YouTubey viewing experience. And a podcast, when you don't necessarily know me, or have respect for my opinions, means that, naturally it's going to gain less attention and views. But I think it's more about, for me, an avenue to explain things like this high line, to talk football a longer period of time, because I am just the sort of person that I have just a lot of thoughts, which I just have the urge to say, and don't really have an avenue to say them in a condensed sort of 6 or 7 minute video where, I do leave out certain details or certain things I want to talk about, because you need to pace a video. You need to make a video flow and feel like a full piece of, 6-minute work. Whereas a podcast allows for a bit more of a free flowing format for me to talk football. So if you are enjoying it, it would be really nice just to leave a thumbs up or something. It doesn't have to be anything nice, but just a thumbs up in the comments, or even just a thumbs up in general, just to know that this is worth to carry on and push through, because obviously when things aren't doing as well as you want them to, or whatnot, it can be a little bit disheartening. But I enjoy them. So I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon, because that's the main important thing. So yeah, thank you guys very much for watching the first 45. Viva la first 45. I don't know. I didn't tell you what accent that was, so, you know, can't cancel me for it. So I'll see you later.